In this module, we are going to talk about proving triangles congruent. And to prove the two triangles are congruent, you need one of the 5 congruent theorems of triangles. And we're going to learn specifically in this notes, we're going to learn about 2 of them. Proving triangles are congruent by SSS means side, side, side. So notice the SSS stands for side, side, side. And what that means is if we have 3 sides in one triangle that are congruent to 3 sides in another triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. In our example off to the side, you can see we've got 2 different triangles, and we can see that side AB, which is here in pink, is congruent. And notice there's only 1 mark right there, so we look for on the other triangle that there's 1 mark, and that is DE. So segment DE. We can see that side BC, so ours with 3 marks, is congruent to FE. And we can see that side CA, so with 2 marks, is congruent to DF. Then we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to our other triangle, and we need to name the triangle. It doesn't matter how the first name is written or whatever order, but the second order does make a difference. We have to make sure that the angle A matches up with the first angle in our answer. So angle A is right here, and it goes from there to B to C. So notice it goes from 1 mark to 3 marks. We need to do the same order on the other one. So if I start at I can start at E or D to get the 1 mark, but if I have to go through the 3 as well, I need to start here and then go that direction. So it'd be triangle DEF, because D is congruent to my A if you look at the angle. So my angle D is between 2 and 1, and my A is between 2 and 1. Our second way of proving 2 triangles are congruent is by side angle side. And that means that if we have 2 sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to 2 sides and the included angle of another triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent to each other. So if we look at our picture again, we can see that RS is the side with 2 marks, so that means it's congruent to side UV. Angle R has our mark that's congruent, so angle U is the one that's congruent to it. RT has 1 mark, and UW also has 1 mark. If we go in the same order as R to S to T, so my angle side with 2 and then nothing, then I need the same order over here. So that would be U, so triangle UVW. What we are going to do next is using those 2 different ways of proving that triangles are congruent. We need to be able to recognize them in pictures to see if the 2 triangles shown are congruent. If they are, we need to state our congruent statement, and if they aren't, then we can just say that it's neither. On the first one, let's go ahead and mark any sides that are congruent to each other. So our 1.7, we have a 2.3, and here's a 2.3. And then 2.4 and a 2.4. So we can see there are 3 sides in one triangle that's congruent to 3 sides in another triangle. So yes, these 2 triangles are congruent by side, side, side. We need to name the first triangle, so let's just go ABC. So I did the 1.7, then the 2.4. And I need to do it the same order on the other triangle. So 1.7, 2.4. So we're going to say that these triangles, let's see, the second one would be D, E, F in that specific order. Number 2, one thing we're going to automatically see is they share a side. And remember that that is reflexive because they share a side in the middle. And now we can see that they both have 3 sets of sides that are congruent. So this is also congruent by side, side, side. I want you to name what the congruent statement is going to be based on our triangles. For the first letters, if you did it as SPL, the second letters then would have to be NLP. For number 3, we can see that we've got an angle that's congruent, and I see a 74 and a 74 here. So those are congruent to each other. And I see a 46 and I see a 46. So notice that my angle is between the two sides. My angle is between the two congruent sides. This means that my triangles are congruent by side, angle, side, because my angle is between the two sides. So my congruent statement for the first one, if I go JKL, then my second one would have to be angle J has to be congruent to angle M, so that has to go first. My next angle has to be my one that is next to the 74, so that would be my N, and then lastly would be my letter P. On number 4, we know again that the side in the middle is shared, and we can see that the 9 is on there. We've got 2 7s. We have a 4 and a 3, but notice those are not congruent. So all we have is 2 sides that are congruent, but we need 3 sides that are congruent, or we need an angle that's also congruent, but we don't have that in this one, so this would definitely be a neither. In the next one, I'm going to give you a little hint because we have parallel lines here with our little red triangles. That tells us if we draw our parallel lines, we've got our side going through it. We have these alternate interior angles that will be congruent. So I want you to go through and figure out, are these two triangles congruent by side, 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 or side, angle, side? What you should have picked out is we know our side is reflexive in the center, and now we have a side, an angle, and another side, a side, an angle, and another side, so these would be congruent by side, angle, side. The triangle on the upper part, if we go A, B, C, in that order, then I need the angle that will be this blank one, so that would be my angle C. So we're going to start out with C, and then B is going to go with D, and then A would be last. I would like you now to do number 6, and are they congruent by side, 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 or side, angle, side? You should have seen that these two sides are congruent. There's a 38 in both of them, but we do not have two sides that are congruent, so this would be neither because we don't have another angle as well to go with it. Parts of just knowing that triangles are congruent is we need to know the pieces that we need. And on these pictures next, if we want to prove that our two triangles are congruent by side, 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 we need 3 sides that are congruent. But on these 2 pictures, we're missing something, and we need to state what needs to be congruent. So with a missing piece that needs to be congruent before we can say that they are congruent by side, side, side. And if you see, we have a side that's congruent, we have another side that's congruent, so we're missing a 3rd side. The side that we would be missing then would be this 3rd side right here. So we need to say that we need BE, so segment BE, to be congruent to segment ED, and there's our answer for that one. I want you to do the next one. Remember in the middle that these are reflexive, so those are we already know that those 2 sides will be congruent to each other. What you should have picked out was that WZ needs to be congruent to DZY. Once we have that, then we could say that they are congruent by side, side, side. I9 and 10, it's the same idea, except we want to prove that they are congruent by side, angle, side. And for side, angle, side, we need 2 sides and the angle between the 2 sides. We need to draw the information that is given in number 9. So JR is congruent to DF, and JM is congruent to DB. We can see we have 2 sides that are congruent already, and the part that we need is we need an angle. But the angle needs to be between the 2 sides that we are given. The only place that would happen would be angle J and angle D. So angle J must be congruent to angle D. And then they would be congruent by side, angle, side. On the next one, I'm going to help you fill out the middle part. So first we know that AC is congruent to CE, but right here we have vertical angles. And remember that vertical angles are congruent to each other, so we do have a set of angles. So I want you to pick out what is the missing piece that needs to be congruent for them to be congruent by side, angle, side. What you should have noticed is that you have one angle and one side already. You need another side, but the side has to be on the other side of the angle in that triangle. So on the triangle on the left, I have an angle, I have a side, an angle, so my side has to be right here. On the triangle on the right, I have a side, an angle, so this is the side that I'm missing. So BC should be congruent to CD, and that's what I need to prove that they are congruent by side, angle, side. When we have two triangles that we know are congruent, that means that any of the angles and any of the corresponding sides can be paired up together, and they are also congruent to each other. And we're going to use that to solve some problems, but we can also use that just to identify the different measures and lengths of the sides. So if we have two triangles, or two figures, it works for any figures as well, that are congruent, then the corresponding sides are congruent, and the corresponding angles are also congruent. In our triangle off to the side, we already have a congruent statement right here, so we know that A is congruent with angle D. We know that B is congruent to E, because that's the order that they are written in, so we can make our little marks on there. C is congruent to F, so I'm going to do 3 for those. And because of that, we can list out some different angle measures. So we know that angle A is congruent to D, so angle A should also be 73 degrees. Angle B is the same as E, so that means the measure of angle B should be the same as E, which would be 65 degrees. And I want you to do something similar now for angle C. I want you to fill in what angle C should be. You should have filled out that angle C should be 42 degrees. Now let's do the same for the sides. We see that AB is together and DE is together, so that means that AB should be congruent to DE. Then that means that DE, the length of DE, will be 2.6 centimeters as well. Next, we can see that BC is together and EF are together. So BC is down here on the side, and EF is also down at the bottom. So EF, I would like you to fill in what that measure should be. You should have chosen 3.7 centimeters. For the last one, we see that A and C are matched up, and D and F are matched up. So AC is right here, and DF is right here. So that means that AC should be the length of 3.5 centimeters. So even if you just have the congruent statement, you should be able to match up which angles, which sides should be congruent in your two triangles. If we use that to answer number 12 down here, you can see that triangle DEF is congruent to NOP, in which statement is not true. So we know that D will be congruent to angle N. We know that E should be congruent to angle O, and angle F will be congruent to angle P. So if you look at just the angle pieces, we can see that D is congruent to N. We do not see that F is congruent to O, but let's check the other ones as well. When I look at the triangle on the left, I know that DE goes first, then EF is my second and third letters, and I usually pair up my first and last, so DF. And then I do the same for the second triangle. So DE was the first two letters, so that'd be NO. EF is the second and third, so that'd be OP. And DF is the first and last, so that would be NP. And if we check over here on the left, we can see that DF is congruent to NP, and EF is congruent to OP. So H is the one that's not true, because F should be congruent to P, not O.